Hello. I want to share my supernatural birth testimony. God is good. God wants you to have a love-filled birth, a good birth, the birth that you have always envisioned in a good way, not in a fear-based way. And I personally, I prayed every single day of my pregnancy. I had a beautiful pregnancy. I had a short labor, not pain-free, but that's probably for birth number 2. I'll have to work on my faith a little bit. But I had the exact birth that I had envisioned throughout my pregnancy. God gave that to me. He blessed me with that. And I really want to share and spread the message that you can have the exact birth that you envision, that you want. So I'm about 3 months postpartum now, and I will quickly go through, or try and quickly go through, what happened in my birth and exactly how that fit into my request that I made to God, and how He fulfilled those promises that He's made in the Word, in His Bible. And I really suggest getting the book Supernatural Childbirth, which is where I'm using the term from, by Jackie Mize. It's a very short book. Definitely invest in it. It's a few hours worth of a read, and it has all the Bible verses you need to pray for the kind of birth that you want, and to get rid of fear, to help conceive if you're having trouble with that, to really harness His promises, which come from praying effectively. And that's really one thing that I think you can easily fall short on, is how to pray effectively. So I kind of want to do another video on that, explaining exactly how to do that. So I started my labor at 39 weeks and 4 days pregnant. So that was the first thing that I had asked for, was that I didn't want to go over 41 weeks pregnant, nor did I want to give birth prematurely before 38 weeks. So it was perfect for me. 39 weeks to 40 weeks was the perfect sweet spot. And that was the first thing I had requested God for. My waters broke at 10 p.m. and this was in bed. It came as a little trickle, which it can do, and then it carries on. That was the second thing I actually prayed for. I wanted to have a clear-cut, unambiguous clear sign that my labor was going to be imminent, because as much as media, TV, films portrays that a woman her water breaks most of the time first, that's not true. It happens in only a minority of people. And I just wanted, as a personal preference, I just wanted to know clear cut when my labor was going to start, with my waters breaking first. So that was a second thing I had asked God for. I start contracting at 5 a.m. the next morning. So I got a little bit of rest in bed, which I also asked God for. I asked Him so that my labor wasn't so tiring, because usually the first time labors can go on for days, even, hours and hours and days. So I wanted some rest, at least. That was another thing that God had granted me, and I was blessed to have. Although I was up most of the night just thinking and preparing spiritually, and that's really what I wanted my waters to break first for, is to spiritually and mentally prepare for the impending birth and labor and birth, I should say. So yeah, my waters broke 10 p.m. My contractions start 5 a.m. I'm contracting that whole sort of day. I call up the hospital a couple times to ask if I should come in. They said, stay at home as much as you can. They really want you to be in properly active labor, so kind of unable to speak almost, and really focused in on yourself before you come into hospital, because it's much more comfortable at home, and there's a high turnaround in hospitals, etc., etc. So I eventually go in at around 5 p.m. I go into hospital. I'm admitted around 7 p.m. The midwife who checked me, she checked me and I was only 2 to 3 centimeters. Now at this point my contractions were very frequent. They were lasting about a minute, which these are the sort of clinical signs that you should be gearing towards active labor. If not, you are in active labor, which is 4 centimeters dilated. But I was not, even though I was becoming vocal at this point, and she could really see me. I was, with each contraction, I was bearing down, holding onto my husband around his neck and really pulling. That was the only position that I felt comfortable in. Every other position I didn't know what to do with myself. This was the only way I could get through the contractions, and I think it's just like a counter pressure sort of position. So she saw what kind of state I was in. She thought I was much more advanced in other ways. My cervix was kind of soft, and so despite the fact that I wasn't at 4 centimeters yet, she had admitted me into the birth center. So that was a blessing, because within those 4 hours at 11 p.m. I'll be giving birth. So she did the right thing in doing that. That was, I guess, those two are things that I prayed for. So I prayed for the staff to be of God's will, for them to be there. I prayed for either a sort of God-based staff, God-led staff, or just whatever God's will. And I always preface my prayers in this way: whatever is the will of God, then that is what I want, as opposed to evil and Satan's will, that I always rebuke and I always pray against. So I said, whatever the staff, in terms of the staff, whatever is God's will for them to be there, whoever is God's will for them to be there, I want them there. So she was definitely, I believe, God sent, and my other midwives were fantastic as well. The ones who were attending the birth, they were amazing, and I also believe God sent. So another thing I had asked for was the birth center. So I really had my mindset on this birth center, which is located within the hospital of my choosing, and it has birth tubs. I wanted a water-based birth, which I didn't get in the end because everything happened really, really quickly. The only thing the water would have provided was pain relief, which I did need, which is why I wanted it so bad at the time. But I mean, it's fine. The main thing was that this birth center has this kind of relaxing, atmospheric kind of feel to it. Everything, it has dimmed lights, and it has the music system you can hook up your music to, and it's located with the labor ward down the corridor. So you wouldn't ever think they were kind of across from each other. You wouldn't think this place is in the hospital, because it was such a really nice atmosphere. So yeah, I had exactly what I envisioned, where I envisioned my birth to be. I had that exact thing come to fruition, thanks to the Lord. So anyway, I am contracting, and it gets to about 9:30ish when I start to ask my midwife for pain relief. So I had prayed not to have any intervention in terms of epidural. I didn't want that to mess with the whole oxytocin cycle, which if you're pregnant, then you'll probably learn in antenatal classes, or here on YouTube there's a lot of things on the cycle, the cycle of labor and how the contractions actually work. Anyway, you can look it up. So I didn't want any pethidine injection, which is what we have. It's like a morphine injection before the epidural, if you want to go in terms of the scale of what we use for pain relief. We go from gas and air, pethidine injection to epidural. So I didn't want anything like the epidural, just because I didn't want that to mess with the natural bodily cycle, right? So I just asked God just for, if I needed anything, then gas and air be the limit, which I got. So I mean, the contractions were intense, and I want to say, for me they were painful, but for you they might not be, because everyone has a subjective experience with pain. Some people don't experience any pain at all. God doesn't want you to experience pain, so that is definitely something that you can achieve. And I think my faith must have fallen short on this aspect, because in a way I had gone into labor without any fear of pain. Pain in my head, the idea of it is so exaggerated in Western society, as far as I can see, the way that media portrays it, with women always screaming and it being, the most tormenting, torturous experience. Not the case. It doesn't have to be. There's so many documentaries nowadays that are proving otherwise, and that you really don't have to go in fearing it. And that is the message that God wants you to, if anything, I want you to take away from this video, is that you don't have to go into it with fear. If you have to work on it every single second of your pregnancy and read out the Bible verses relating to fear, and to getting rid of the spirit of fear and harnessing the spirit of love, then do it. I need you to do it, because I went in without fear, and even though I had prepared myself, I still experienced pain, subjective pain, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle and that I couldn't push through. I've experienced pain in my life. That was not the worst pain that I've experienced in life. The main thing was that I was getting tired. So it wasn't necessarily that I couldn't handle the pain, but I couldn't handle how it was wearing me down. So I thought that having the gas and air would give me a little bit of a break. And well, what it did was help me get further along, get into my active stage of labor. So I really want you to know that the contractions, call them contractions, don't call them labor pains. I really don't like when people call them labor pains, because you might not experience pain. They are contractions. It is what it is. Labor is hard, as the term labor denotes. It's going to be laborious. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be a challenge, but it's nothing your body can't handle. Your body's made to do this, and God doesn't want you to experience pain. So I'm there contracting. In retrospect, I really think that I had seized up my body a little bit too much. I don't know what had really let the contractions get to me. Maybe it was fear, the spirit of fear, which is, something that I am going to work on for the next subsequent birth, if I am blessed enough to have another child. I really believe that maybe I was too fearful of the pain, that if I let the pressure kind of take over, because I really felt like I needed to push for quite a while, even though I was at 2 to 3 centimeters, I really felt the need to push, and maybe I was kind of fearful of that it's going to be too much for me to handle, right? So I think I did let a little bit of fear creep in there. But nevertheless, my midwife checks me at 9:30, and she says that I am only 3 centimeters. Yes, she says I'm only 3 centimeters dilated. And obviously, I'm completely disheartened. I am just, I'm confused, because these contractions are so intense that I'm asking for pain relief, which in my head doesn't make sense if you're not in active labor. Like, come on, my pain tolerance should be a lot higher than this. So my midwife said, no, don't worry, your cervix is soft and you are fully effaced. So I guess that is what my contractions were doing. I was pretty much ready in other parts of labor, but just with dilation, I wasn't. So she said to wait for the gas and air until later, which I completely agree with. When the labor's further progressed and it's bound to get more painful at that point, then I should save my arsenal for then. However, the next contraction, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the fact that I was disheartened and it got to me. It was the most painful contraction of all, the most intense but painful to me. And so I got her back and I said, I need the gas and air. So she gave me the gas and air, and this really, from there on out, allowed me to relax that tension that was stopping the cycle in my body. It helped me relax, it gave me a lightheaded kind of feeling. I thought I was going to feel tipsy, because that's how it's sort of described as the gas and air, but for me, I just had lightheadedness, and it was just enough for me to relax my body, because the next stage of labor started to occur. So I take the gas and air, my waters break even further, there's more leakage, which often happens. Is only sort of one part of the sac that may break, and then further along labor, more parts of the sac breaks. So I was leaking. At this point, I am about an hour and a half away from giving birth. So this is when my active labor was clocked in, and eventually it's clocked in at 1 hour 36 minutes. So yeah, so the next part, I had to be checked. My baby had to be monitored at 10 p.m. because hospital policy has it that 24 hours after your water breaks, you need to start monitoring the baby, because there is increased risk of infection. So that's another thing I prayed for. I didn't want any intervention, which after 24 hours of your waters breaking, there is risk of infection, risk of intervention because of maybe your baby gets distressed, etc. I really prayed against that. I didn't want my baby being in distress. I didn't want my baby getting tired from the labor. I didn't want things to go wrong on that end. I didn't want any intervention with like forceps or ventouse or cesarean. I really prayed hard against that, because that's just my personal preference. It's how I envision my birth to be, as natural as possible. And this is just my way of involving God and having a God-based kind of birth. If I ended up with any of those, then I would still say it was of God's will, because you never know what kind of evil he was preventing, or what his message is with any of that happening in your life. So I kind of want to preface that or disclaim that if you've had that happen, then it doesn't mean that it's not of God. So they wanted me to get down the corridor to the triage room where the CTG monitor is, in order to monitor the baby's heartbeat, see what's going on there, see if there's any distress on his end. And I get into the room. At this point, I really feel like pushing actually. I'm wailing, you know, I'm vocal the way I've never been before, or I've never heard myself before, which is completely normal. Expect it. But don't fear it. Expect, but don't fear, you know, prepare. So I take one look at the trolley and see that it's in supine position, because you need to be lying down in order to have everything strapped on, and I just couldn't. That lying down, any other position than bearing down and holding onto my husband's neck and pushing down, any other position was excruciating, and I had tried. So I take one look at it and I say to her, my midwife, I can't do it. And she said just to try between contractions. So I try, and I don't know what kind of triggered it, but at this point I was shouting for help, because I was trying to find a comfortable position. I felt like the pressure was so much down there that I was ready to push. So I tell her that, you know, probably in a not so calming way, and she checks me. I'm bent over the trolley, and she checks down there, and she says, okay, we need to get back to the delivery room ASAP. Cool. So in my head, all right, this is happening. I'm about to give birth. I can feel it. I know it's gonna happen anytime soon. And at this point, I'm about half an hour away from giving birth, I believe. So we get back to the room. My midwife starts to fill the bathtub, you know, open the taps, etc. And what was coming out was a trickle. I really wanted a water birth, and I was waiting and waiting. I was almost crossing my legs with each contraction because I didn't want to push yet. And at one point I asked my midwife if I can just jump in the birth tub, and it was only like that much filled. So she said if I need to push, then just start pushing. So I dropped to the floor, legs spread, in the position that I was comfortable in giving birth, and I start pushing. So 15 minutes later of pushing, and my baby's born. Beautiful, beautiful baby. So that's one thing. Another thing I prayed for. I prayed that I didn't want my pushing part of labor to be long. You know, sometimes it can last for hours, and I didn't want that. I don't think I could have lasted that. And really, I think I was blessed so much to have a quick labor. I did pray for a quick labor. I didn't necessarily think that a long labor was bad. So I said, if God willing, it can be short without any trauma, because there are risks associated with having such a quick birth. But I think God knew that if I had left it any longer, I would have been so tired and just asked for the epidural, because at that point, asking for gas and air, I would have easily soon after gone for the epidural. He knows that that's not what I wanted, so I think he just made it as he gave me the gas and air. He let my body relax just that little bit that I needed to progress onto the active stage of labor. He made it nice and quick because he knew that I probably wouldn't last any longer with the way that I wanted to. And so, yeah, that's what happened. So I'm really blessed. My baby was completely healthy, and this is the most important thing I was praying every single day for, was that I wanted my baby to be happy, healthy, just completely free of any, anything that can go wrong, infection, disease, even postpartum, like anything can happen. And of course, I'm still praying every day. That's not going to change, and I'm praying for my child, and I'm doing all the things that I need to do to try and live a righteous life, asking for forgiveness, giving forgiveness, and really just trying my best every day, as we should all be trying just as much as we can to live a God-filled life. So kind of back to the main message of letting go of fear. Don't let the spirit of fear possess you. Prepare as much as you can. Write all the Bible verses that you want. to take to read while you're contracting in the early stages of labor. When you actually get to labor, it's a little bit difficult. You know, I did have Bible verses prepared, but I didn't at all get around to reading them, because you're just so focused in on yourself, and really it's a mental battle, and you've just got to choose the side. Spiritually, you've got to choose the side on which you want to be on. You know, I watch a lot of Kevin L.A. Ewing here on YouTube, who has a lot of very, very good advice on how to pray effectively. I've learned so much from him, so check him out if you haven't. But as he says, everything happens spiritually first, and in the spiritual realm. So if you want any kind of physical manifestation, if you want anything to happen in the physical, then you need to work on the spiritual first. Everything comes from there. And you really, in my head, there's a constant battle between good and evil, between God and Satan, and you have to constantly choose the side you're going to be on. Are you going to let the spirit of fear, which is on the evil side of things, possess you, or are you going to let God's perfect love cast out that fear? So in whatever way you need to get that message and get it written on your hearts, as it says on the Bible, do it. It's all you need to work on for this upcoming labor and birth. So that's my story, that's my testimony. Hopefully I will have another testimony for the next time that I'm going to give birth. So I would love to hear your story, if you have one, of a supernatural childbirth, meaning just God-based, with God intervening, God giving you the birth that you had prayed for. And really, I just love hearing these kinds of things, these messages, spreading God's grace, God's promises. So yes, with prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and you will get everything that He's ever promised for you in His Bible and His Word. And if you don't believe that you can get everything that you've ever wanted for your pregnancy, labor, birth, and beyond, then I'm telling you it's possible. And if you don't believe me, then believe God, because He tells you that nothing is impossible through Him. Nothing is impossible. So take that with you, write it on your heart, and I'll see you next time. Here's my beautiful baby. His name is Cristiano, and not for Ronaldo, for follower of Christ, it means in Italian or Portuguese, or both. And he is 3 months. Is it this week? How many weeks are you now? How many weeks? I think he's 15 weeks. So this is my cutie. And this is all I prayed for a beautiful, happy, healthy baby. And thanks to God, I'm blessed to have that. What are you looking at? What are you looking at, Bubbles? Huh? Say bye.